Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, Judge Dredd. I'm here with Geeky Villain, and today we're going to be going over Malifaux a little more in depth. We're going to start by talking with blasts, auras, pulses, shockwaves, and pretty much everything marker related. So before we get into that, we need to talk about a couple concepts. One, where do we find markers? If you're fortunate enough, a lot of times during the sales, they'll produce these things right here, where they give these out as promos with nice little 30mm bases. You can go to some custom websites, custom shops, and you can order ones and have them all done up real nicely. Or the way a lot of my players do it is anytime you buy a box from Weird, it comes with the logo and the pictures of what you're buying, the product on it, right? So you just take a 30mm base and over the side, draw a circle around your faction's logo and then just cut that out. So we use these for scheme markers, and then we go over the faces of the models and we use those for corpse markers. So those are great ideas for getting some corpse and some scheme markers if you don't have them or don't know where to get them. It's a great way to start, okay? So once you have your markers made and you're ready to play, we're going to talk about the difference between creating and dropping scheme markers, or any markers really. So if you are going to drop a marker, you can place a marker in base-to-base contact with the model that dropped it. So for instance, let's say our drowned right here, let's say he was going to drop a marker. He can place it in base-to-base contact with himself. The important thing to remember with a dropped marker is that dropped markers can be placed underneath other models. They can go in terrain as long as it's not impassable, but they can be placed underneath terrain or underneath other models, which is very important. Created markers cannot be, and we'll get into the difference in that in a little bit. But just know that dropped markers can go under other models. Created markers cannot be produced in, or cannot be made in base-to-base contact or underneath other models. All right. So those are the real important pieces to remember with the markers. First, let's talk about blasts, which blasts are a dropped marker. So our drowned here, we're going to use him as our blast marker. He has an attack called Projectile Vomit, and it can produce 2 different blasts on moderate and severe damage. A blast is always a 50mm base. We have these nice ones. We were using some smoke markers, but we're going to use these as blast markers today, okay? So we're going to fast forward through the targeting and attacking of another model. So he's already targeted, he's already attacked another model, and it's succeeded, and we're going to say that he flipped severe damage, okay? So the model that he hits will suffer severe damage, and then he will place his blast marker, and you can see right here on his attack, he has 3 blasts. Blasts are indicated by the little mushroom cloud. So he produces 3 blasts off of the 1 attack. So Archie will suffer the damage, the severe damage, and then we'll take this and we'll place it into base-to-base contact with him. And then the other 2 markers we'll place any way we want, remaining in base-to-base contact with the previous one placed, okay? Like so. Now, Archie is immune to the blast damage from the attack that hit him. But if we had another model, and I know we're jumping around from factions, but let's say this guy's center right here, and then this blast overlapped his base, he takes the next stage down in damage. So if you flip severe damage on Archie, then he would take moderate damage. All of these blasts would produce moderate damage for anyone they touched. If you flip weak damage, the blast will produce 1 damage. Okay, so with the projectile vomit, the damage is just 1 across the board, so it doesn't matter with his particular attack. Even if multiple blasts overlapped a single model, you still would only take damage from the 1 blast because they all have the same name. So that's how blasts work, all right? And some rules vary depending on your blast, but you'll find your specific rules on your card in the text. I think Sonia Crid can produce her blasts up to 2 inches away from her initial target. But if it doesn't specify otherwise, it is a 50mm placed in base-to-base contact with the targeted model that you hit with the attack, and then placing the blast off of that, as you see down here in this demonstration, okay? Now these markers, these blast markers, are dropped. So when you place this here, you can then place it underneath your model and pass over him, all right? That's why it's important to remember dropped versus created on your text, okay? So the next thing we're going to go over after we go after blasts is we're going to go over auras, all right? And auras are very important. We're going to switch all of our guys out here, and we're going to go over to Mr. Jackdaw, all right? Mr. Jackdaw creates an aura, and I'll bring it up here so you guys can see it. His disturbing whispers, enemy models within 6 inches, and you can see the little stick figure guy inside of a dark filled-in circle. Enemy models within 6 inches of this model suffer -1 to their willpower. All right. Auras are always on, so it doesn't matter if the model is activated, if it's in the middle of an action, if it's being targeted. The aura is always in effect, and it's always considered in play. The auras also affect the person creating. So Jackdaw specifically says enemy models, so that doesn't count him, but a lot of auras will state models in this range or friendly models in this range get negative twists when being targeted by an attack action. So if you targeted that model producing the aura, it would also mean that you had a negative twist when you were attacking them. Okay, so that's pretty much it with auras, and it's from the edge of the base. So his 6-inch aura is going to come out 6 inches from each side of his base. All right. After auras, we have pulses, and pulses are, where's my pulse guy? We're going to use Jackdaw again for his pulses, okay? So his fickle tormentor, again, I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'll bring it close. The pulse is going to be the parentheses around a little dark stick figure, and then it'll have a number. So this one is pulse 4 inches. This model draws cards equal to the number of enemy models within range with attached curse upgrades. Okay, so a pulse does not affect the model that produced it. So again, it's a moot point in his particular one, but if you had the gremlins have a lot of pulses when they do certain things, when they explode or get hit with something, the pulse would not affect the model that is generating the pulse action. It would only affect the models within the given range of that model. All right. A pulse action is a once-off. It happens and then it's done. It's considered more of like an instance effect. It goes out, it does its effect, and then it dissipates. Those are the two main differences with pulses and auras. All right. Their height is considered to be the same height as the model, auras, excuse me, the auras model. So Jackdaw's height 2, so his aura only extends to height 2. All right, a model standing on a height 3 or height 4 building would not be considered in his aura. It would have to be at his same height. Blasts are considered to have +1 height and -1 height from wherever they go off. So if you have a model on a height 1 box or ledge, and then he's hit with a blast and it's produced from same level as him, it would also hit a model that was at height 0 and a model that was at height 2, because it would be +1 and -1 from the height that it was generated at. Those are the big 3 that we have. The other one is the newest mechanic called Shockwave. And Shockwave is a very unique ability, and it's new to 3rd edition. We never saw it in 2nd edition. How Shockwave works, we're going to bring Wong's card out here to look at the text. I'm sorry I don't actually have Wong's model with me, but we've got his text right here. So right here, let's see if you can see that. It'll say Shockwave 2, move 13, damage 2, and then it'll have some text afterwards. Friendly models may choose to fail this duel without flipping, etc., 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 based off of his, okay? So a Shockwave, you take a 30mm base and you put it within range. So it's called Fizzap. It's a projectile within 10 inches of his base. So you measure it out, you get 10 inches, wherever that looks like. You place the 30mm marker, and then it says Shockwave 2. So it is 2 inches from the marker that you just created. So a 2-inch circle around that, anything in that circle is affected by the Shockwave. Then it says move 13. So the attack, every model that's affected by that would have to take a move 13 duel. That's a duel against their move stat, and they have to meet or exceed 13. Otherwise, they suffer damage 2. Okay? The nice part about Shockwaves is they don't actually target a specific model. So usually you'll see things, the Fried Corpsemen have grenades with Shockwaves. A lot of the Gremlins, they'll throw pianos, or Wong throws his lightning magic around, and those will create shockwaves. So with the Shockwave, it doesn't actually target a model, so it gets around things like manipulate or any of those things that say when this model is targeted, it doesn't target anything. So it just gets placed, gets created, does its effect, and then goes away. So shockwaves are a really, really new mechanic, and they're really scary for especially rezzers and some of the factions that rely on kind of trickier mechanics and not traditional defensive stats or armor. It gets around a lot of that stuff, so be on the lookout for that. The last couple things that we're going to talk about is going to be push and place, and how that is affected with hazardous terrain. Hazardous terrain can have, like we talked about in the terrain section video, hazardous terrain can have many different stats. It can be damage 1, it could be poison, it could be burning. Right now we're going to use just a little section of river right here, and we're going to call this just traditional hazardous terrain, so it does 1 damage. Anytime you move through or resolve an action in hazardous terrain, you suffer the effects. Both pushes and places are considered move actions. And that's really important because leap is a place, and a couple other things will have places. Even though you start in and you start your activation inside the terrain, like Archie has a leap ability. So even though you start here and he places outside, you would think, I resolved my action outside of the hazardous terrain, which is true, but pushes and places are both considered movement. So he would take the hazardous terrain damage. And the place is simply, I think we talked about it in one of the other videos, but if we didn't, it is placing from their current position within the range of whatever their status. So Archie has a leap of 6. So as long as one sliver of his base is within 6 inches, that's a valid place. And with a 50mm base, that gets you a lot of movement on those places. All right? Well, thank you for joining us on this video. And if you have any questions, have any comments, or you want to see a video about something new or different in Malifaux, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. And we'll see you next time.